Couldn't be in a better place at a better time than tuning into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, I'm gonna give you more. This is a huge dose of personal initiative, the go-getter energy that moves you to make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. We put all this together, you get the mindset, the method, the philosophy, the book, the show, known as Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. Today's topic, mastering the details. Yesterday, we talked about not making assumptions. And one of the key points of not making assumptions is to pay attention to detail. And do not assume that the details are taken care of, because if you're trusting someone else to take care of the details, I guarantee if they know you're not paying attention to them, they won't pay attention to those details themselves. Mastering the details is something that anyone who's going to be in a position of leadership, a position of ownership, a position of accomplishment must get under their belt. You must master the skill of mastering the details. My senior year of college, I got a business degree from Penn State University, and to get a business degree from Penn State, you have to complete a business internship. Now I knew that my career was going to be in professional sports probably by my sophomore year of college. I knew that's what I wanted to do for a living, but being that I was in the business degree program on that track, I was not allowed to just get a basketball internship. And I don't know if those even existed back then. I don't know if anyone would have been open to that possibility for me back then. So I had to get some kind of business internship. And of course, since I wasn't really trying to go into the traditional business world as was known, at least back then, I wonder what internships are like now. I mean, with so many different possibilities online. But back then, we didn't have all those possibilities. Your internship was going to be you going to some office building in business casual clothing and actually working in there. And the very idea of it gave me a headache. I absolutely didn't want to do that. But I had to do this internship, right? So I finally got an internship my last semester. It's a 9-credit class, while I was still taking a bunch of credits of school. And the semester before that, before you actually do your internship, you have to take this internship prep class. Now, this is a very basic class. It's a 1-credit class. It meets like once a month or once every 2 weeks. And it was just the person who ran the internship program. Her name was Mrs. Wood at Penn State Altoona. She would just go over with us, here are the things you need to understand about an internship, the things you should know about going to job interviews, and things you should do while you have an internship so that you can better position yourself to possibly get a job with that company and work for them after you get out of school. Hopefully, if you're good in an internship, the whole idea of an internship, at least at that time, the way it was presented to us was to perform so well as an intern that when your internship is up and you graduate, that company offers you a full-time job. Even if you don't want to work there, you still should be good enough at your internship that they want you to work there, even if you're not trying to. But a lot of my classmates who were in that internship prep course, they were all kind of looking to keep working full-time at wherever they were interning at. And again, that whole proposition just was not my cup of tea, but I had to do it because that was part of playing the game. Like we talked about a couple weeks ago, you're gonna be a hustler. You got to learn how to play the game, even if there are aspects of the game that you don't really want to play. So during that 1-credit internship prep class, there was one thing that we did there that was actually beneficial. Only one thing. Because the class only met like once a week or once every 2 weeks. It wasn't like a deep teaching class. There were no tests or anything like that. You just had to show up, that's all. But Mrs. Wood had us go through what she called I can't remember what she called it. She called it a mock interview. That's the word. A mock interview where you practice actually being interviewed by her and another person. They would act as like the hiring managers or the HR people at company X, the ABC company, and you would go in there and they would ask you a bunch of questions and you would have your own set of questions, and you just wanted to practice being interviewed for a job. And this is what Penn State decided. I guess Mrs. Wood, as the professor, decided this is the way that I can help these kids get ready for actually being in a real job interview, is to do this. And in that job, this faux job interview that she set up, Mrs. Wood told us about the rules of 12. I had never heard of this before, and I never heard anyone else use it since, so I'm going to steal it from her and use it now. So thank you, Mrs. Wood. The rules of 12 was that when you walk into a room, the two things that people notice, three things that people notice. First of all, they notice the 12 inches from the top of your head on down. So if you were to take a ruler or a measuring tape and measure from the top of your head 1 foot down, 12 inches, they notice that 12 inches. So that means your hair, your makeup for females or men, if whatever floats your boat. Make sure your eyebrows are going in the right direction. Don't have anything in your teeth. Make sure your collar is clean. Whatever it is from the 1 foot to the top of your head. Make sure all of that is clean and looking the way it's supposed to look. Also, the 12 inches from the bottom of your shoes on up. So make sure your shoes are clean, your cuffs are clean, that your socks are, matching your clothing in whatever way that they need to match. If you don't have socks on, make sure your ankles ain't ashy. Make sure the bottom of your shoes are clean or whatever is going on there. They notice the bottom from the ground on up. And people notice you the first 12 seconds that you walk in. People make snap judgments about you and pretty much decide how they feel about you, despite whatever it is that happens or gets said over the next hour or two. Those are the rules of 12. Top of your head, bottom of your shoes, and the first 12 seconds when you walk in. People make a decision about you that quickly. People that know their stuff. I'm bringing up the rules of 12 to follow into this point. People who know their stuff master the details of their own operations. And when they're assessing you, they are looking at those exact same details. So now that you know the rules of 12, actually take a look at yourself right now. Look at the top 12 inches of your body and the bottom 12 inches, and then think about the last person you encountered. What snap judgments would they have made about you in the first 12 seconds of seeing you? Today, what we're talking about are some principles of being on top of your details, mastering all your rules of 12, so to speak, not necessarily about your physical appearance or the way that you walk into a room, but all the details that go into whatever it is that you're doing. Because again, anybody who's really on top of their stuff, who's really good at what they do, who's going to get to the top of what they're doing, they are paying attention to the details. So if you're not, then make sure you start doing it, following what I'm going to say here today. And if you are, then check yourself for what I'm going to talk about here today. Because if you're not doing what I'm going to say here today, maybe you're not paying as much attention to details as you thought you were. So point number one, today's topic once again is mastering the details. Now, speaking of my internship, I had a hard time even finding an internship simply because I wasn't really trying to find an internship. I was very much procrastinating on going after this internship thing, and I really didn't know where to start because, as I eventually confessed to Mrs. Wood at Penn State, I know what I want to do, Mrs. Wood. I want to play basketball. I don't want to be working in any office. I just need to get this out of the way so I can graduate and go on to do what I want to do. And luckily, thankfully, Mrs. Wood was understanding of my ambition. I don't think she knew a damn thing about playing professional basketball, but she understood my position, and I was showing up to all her classes. I wasn't like I was some jerk off student. So she was nice enough to actually work with me and help me find an internship. And she helped me find an internship with this guy named Phil Sky, who actually just passed away maybe 2 years ago, but he was a big benefactor of the Penn State Altoona campus. They actually named the cafeteria on campus is named after this guy, Phil Sky. He was a big businessman who did a lot of stuff he worked in. He had a food company that he owned and a bunch of other things he did. And he gave a lot of money to the campus and gave money in all these different places. Good guy, this man, Phil Sky. So she got me an internship, basically working for him. And he has all these different businesses. So he had me doing some business that he was trying to get off the ground, some fledgling idea that may or may not end up having worked. It ended up not working, but we don't need to get into that, because it doesn't matter. It wasn't really that interesting. I wrote an article about it. If you want to read it on my website, just go to my website and just search internship, or just Google Dre Baldwin internship. You can read about it. But one of the things that Phil Sky told me, and I spent not even a lot of time, but a little bit of time around him, but for the most part, he would just assign me work and we catch up with each other maybe once a week or something. But once I was riding in the car with him, and he's told me, he was the first person I ever heard say this. He said, when you're a boss or a manager at what you do, people do not do what you expect. They do what you inspect. And this is something that I was touching on yesterday. I didn't use this phrase. I was saving it. But this is something I was touching on yesterday. I talked about assuming. See, when you expect people to do things and you leave it at that, you're making an assumption that they're actually going to do it just because they know you have an expectation. But when you inspect what people are doing, they know that you're not just assuming it. That yes, you may be expecting it, but also you're going to check. Yes, you're trusting, but you're going to verify. People do what they know is going to be inspected because they know it's going to be checked on. If they don't do it, they're going to get called out for it. They're going to be held accountable. But if you're just expecting it, you're not checking on it, people might not do it. Why? Because they know you're not going to inspect it. Those of you who are in the boss, leader, manager, owner position in anything, having anyone subordinate to you does not let you off the hook of actually doing work. All right, in case you thought it did, it doesn't. Your job at that point, once you have other people working for you, or at least part of your job, is checking the details of whatever it is they're supposed to be doing. Checking the details of the people to whom you have assigned work. If you aren't looking at the details, they know that you're not looking at the details, and they will get lazy on the details simply because they're human. Not because they're bad people, not because they're lazy, but we're all lazy, but because they're human. Then things start crumbling all around you, and it's your fault. It's not because you have bad people. It's not because you can't find good people. It's because you are failing to inspect the work that you're asking other people to do. And if you're not inspecting, the details will get skirted on. They will not get done the way that they're supposed to get done. And then you're going to have a problem on your hands. And it's all your fault because you're the one in charge. So people do not do what you expect. They do what you inspect. Trust but verify. Point number 2. Today's topic is mastering the details. The details are what separate the great from the good, in case you didn't know. Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson was the coach of the Chicago Bulls, LA Lakers, legendary NBA coach, won more championships as a coach than anyone ever. He won 11 rings, wrote a book called 11 Rings, coached Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, some of the greatest players of all time, and took them all to championships. Phil Jackson, when he would run practices as a head coach in the NBA, you know how his teams would start practice? You know the first things they would do at the beginning of every practice? They would practice throwing chest passes and post-entry passes. They would practice throwing the ball to each other, in other words. That's what Phil Jackson, coaching Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, he would have them practice throwing the basketball to each other. John Wooden, who won 10 championships as a coach of UCLA basketball. He won 10 championships in 12 years, including 7 in a row. So you want to talk about winning and dominating and being the best? 10 in 12 years, 7 in a row. When a new player came to UCLA to play on the basketball team, you know the first thing John Wooden taught that player? He didn't teach them how to hold up the championship trophy to practice for the end of the season, no. He would teach them how to put on their socks and how to tie their shoes properly so as to prevent blisters on their feet. Then he would take players such as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, at the time was Lou Alcindor, became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was the biggest high school basketball prospect in the history of the world until LeBron James, this guy who became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Bill Walton, who also was the best high school player in the country before coming to UCLA. These are the best players in the nation. So imagine somebody like Zion Williamson, for example, who just came out a year ago out of high school. John Wooden would have these guys, best player in the nation in high school. He would have them practicing making layups every single day. He had to make 100 layups, just a layup. The most basic shot that a 6-year-old kid can do. He would have the best high school player in the nation just shooting layups all day in practice. Imagine Coach K telling Zion Williamson, I'm just going to have you make layups all practice. This is what John Wooden would do with his players. And he had the best players. Late in his career, someone asked him, Coach Wooden, what's the key to winning so many championships? He said, I had the best players. You got the most talent, you're probably going to be pretty good. And he took these players and had them doing the most basic stuff that a lot of you players who are listening to this right now who don't have nearly the talent of the guys Phil Jackson coach or the guys that John Wooden coach, you be rolling your eyes if somebody told you to do these basic things. These are what the best coaches in history were doing. Why? Oh, let me tell you one more guy, Larry Brown, another legendary coach. He didn't win as many championships as Phil Jackson and John Wooden, but he got a couple of his own. He coached some legendary players. He took a lot of teams that looked like they were going nowhere and made them into going somewhere. He would have players practice throwing post-entry passes. He would have players practice the footwork that goes with throwing a pass. How many of you basketball players know that there's a certain type of footwork that goes with a pass? How many of you have ever practiced the footwork to the proper coordinated footwork to go with certain types of passes. When you're throwing a ball, a chest pass, there's a certain footwork that goes with that. A bounce pass has a certain footwork. A post entry pass has a certain type of footwork. Larry Brown would have NBA players. These are guys making millions of dollars to play basketball, been playing basketball their whole lives. They've been the best player on every team they've ever been on their entire lives. He would have them practicing the proper footwork to go with throwing a pass, to practice for a game in which they're about to play against Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. That's what he would have players doing in the NBA. Now, why were these players who were so good, these coaches rather, who were so good doing this? Because they understood the details. The fundamentals were the key to success. Because they already knew that the people that they had on their teams had talent. They knew. Larry Brown knew that Allen Iverson had talent. He knew, Phil Jackson knew that Kobe and Shaq had talent. John Wooden knew that Bill Walton and Lou Alcindor, who later became Kareem, he knew that they had talent. But if they couldn't harness that talent with any fundamentals, with understanding the details of the game, they would be selling themselves short. No matter how talented they were, no matter how great they became, they would never get to their full level of greatness without understanding those details. Mastering the details is what allowed them to make the most of the talent that they had. Those are, if you remember me talking maybe a month or two ago about the stabilizer muscles, to go around the muscle. Any of you who lifts weights, you may understand the stabilizers. If you don't, I'll explain. You'll understand. When you lift a weight on a machine, for example, the machine is set up to stabilize the weight, and it stabilizes your body so that there's only one way that the machine can move. There's only one way that you can lift that weight. It isolates the muscle in particular that you're going to lift with. I remember I was doing a bench press machine when I was a freshman in college. This is the first time I really started lifting weights. Freshman in college, I was using the bench press machine. So I'm pressing it on the bench and I'm doing my thing. I'm up over like 200 pounds and I'm feeling good. I'm like, man, I'm pretty strong. I'm benching 200 pounds on this machine. And then I finally started using free weights. I started doing a bench press free weight, and I saw very quickly, in a very brief period of time, very brief, that I could not free weight bench 200 pounds, even though I had been doing it on the machine. And I was like, wait a minute, why was I able to do it on the machine, but I can't do it on the free weight? And here's why. When you're using a machine, the machine is set up so that the only thing you had to do is exploit that one muscle, the pectoral muscle. When I was doing a bench, that's the chest muscle. It was isolating to only work that muscle. But when you're doing a free weight lift, now you have to stabilize the weight on your own, and you have to stabilize your body on your own. You don't have the machine working for you. The machine takes a whole lot of load off of the rest of your body when you're using it. When you're using a free weight, all that load, you have to figure it out on your own. That's why it takes a whole lot more strength to do a free weight lift than it does to do a machine lift. This is why when you see the guys with the really big muscles in the gym, where do they hang out? Where do they congregate? They're always around the free weights. This is why. This is a basic understanding of weightlifting for those of you who don't know this. I realized that my stabilizer muscles, when you're doing a bench press, that your core needs to be strong, your back has to be strong, your wrists, your forearms, your biceps, your shoulders, all of those muscles are working when you're doing a free weight bench press. But when you're doing a machine bench press, none of those muscles are working. At least not as much, let's put it that way. So when you're doing a free weight, all the muscles around the targeted muscle become the stabilizer muscle. Now I'm explaining that to you to analogize that to what I'm talking about here with the fundamentals. The fundamentals of everything that you do, which are the details. That's the detailed work that you need to do to master fundamentals that is boring to a lot of people. Those fundamentals are the stabilizer muscles, metaphorically speaking, that allow you to maximize the talent that is the main targeted muscle. Everybody follow that analogy? So to analogize what I'm saying to the basketball players, Michael Jordan's talent as a player was his pectoral muscle, but the fundamentals were his wrists, his forearms, his shoulders, his biceps, his back, and his core. Those are the stabilizers. Because he mastered the fundamentals, playing for Dean Smith at North Carolina, then Phil Jackson in the NBA, mastering the fundamentals, he was forced to do it because that's what the coach told the players to do. Then he was able to maximize the power of that main muscle, which was his talent as a basketball player. At the same time, some of you may have seen this. Any of you who are athletes, I'm sure you've seen this. Somebody who is very talented. They have a lot of ability. They have all the tools, but their fundamentals are so terrible that their mastering of the details is completely non-existent. They have never been challenged or forced to pay attention to the details. Those stabilizer muscles of their talent are so weak that all they have is that one main muscle. You put them in a position where they got to lift the free weight, and they're not as impressive as you thought they would be. That's because they have not mastered the details. So hopefully everybody followed that analogy. I think I laid that out pretty well. Steve Jobs. You don't know who Steve Jobs is. He's the guy who designed that Apple device that you're using right now. Take a look at your MacBook or your iPhone or your iPad or whatever else is, what else we got? AirPods, everything else that Apple makes. Steve Jobs stressed every single detail of how those devices were made. Look at your computer. Look at your laptop computer or your desktop Apple computer and just look how smooth it is, all the smooth edges and how ergonomic it is and just how beautiful the device looks. And then compare that to the average personal computer or the PC laptop. And look how the PC looks like a mechanical device. It looks like a tool, right? Whereas the Apple device looks like it's something you could sit on your coffee table and not even open it and it just looks good. Steve Jobs stressed that detail. That was not something that just happened. He didn't just luckily hire a designer who understood that stuff and they did it. No, Steve Jobs stressed that things would be done that way. He stressed that the iPhone be made out of one single piece of glass. You know that glass that you swipe your finger across 1,000 times a day when you're using your phone, that every phone has copied? Steve Jobs stressed to his designers that you must find glass that is strong enough that it's not going to shatter if somebody touches it or it falls on the floor. And at the same time, people can swipe their finger across it and the screen will be responsive to it. He stressed that it be like that. He stressed that every Apple device, such as the computers and the tablets and the phones, not have screws in them that looked ugly, because he thought screws looked ugly and people could take it apart and all of that. He stressed that it be one piece, that you could hold it in your hand and you would just admire it for the beauty of the device, let alone the functionality of how it worked. Steve Jobs stressed all those things, every single detail. Smooth, one piece, easy to hold, pretty to look at. The glass for the iPhone screen was stress test until they got it right. Let me tell you something else about Steve Jobs when it comes to detail. Most of us, I'll include myself, will never see the inside of an iPhone. You'll never see what it looks like inside a MacBook computer or a MacBook Air or a desktop computer. You'll never see the inside of an Apple device. And Steve Jobs designed it that way. As I just said, he didn't like the look of the screws on the outside of a device. He didn't want people to be able to take it apart because he believed the consumer to be, in a good way, stupid. He didn't want them to have to figure anything out. If anything goes wrong with an Apple device, what do? You don't take it apart and fix it yourself. You got to go into the Apple store and they'll fix it for you. They'll charge you for it, but they'll fix it. Why did he do that? Because he didn't want any room for human error with his devices. He wanted the only people seeing the inside of those devices, people who have been trained by him to fix them the right way. But here's the thing, the reason why I'm telling you about that. Steve Jobs even stressed that even though 99% of Apple users will never see the inside of a device, that even the inside of the devices be designed beautifully. I don't know if you can find a picture of that on Google. I didn't even look that up before I put this in my notes and mentioned it here today, but you can look it up, see if you can find what it looks like on the inside of an iPhone or the inside of a laptop. I've seen the inside of some PCs and it doesn't look good. It looks like it was made by a person who understood that most people would never see the inside. It looked like it was made by a person who said it doesn't matter what the inside looks like because that's not the part they're going to be looking at. Steve Jobs demanded that the inside of a laptop and the inside of an iPhone be designed so beautifully that if by chance, for whatever reason, that device ever got opened up, it would still look good on the inside, even though nobody's ever going to see it. That's attention to detail. And these guys who I just mentioned, Larry Brown, Steve Jobs, John Wooden, Phil Jackson, they're the best of the best. You know who they are, even if you don't follow, even if you don't buy Apple products, even if you don't watch basketball, you know who they are. And they're the best of the best, and they all stressed the details of what they do. They didn't just say, hey, let's just focus on maximizing our talent. Let's just make sure that we have the best people around, or the best products, or the best prices, or do a whole bunch of branding and marketing. Let's make sure that these guys we have around us who are the best of the best, that they understand the details, the beauty of the details, and paying so much attention to it, even to the point of being an asshole about it. Any of you read the Steve Jobs book by Walter Isaacson, you understand Steve Jobs was a real asshole about the details. If you haven't read that book, I suggest you do read it. Steve Jobs ran some people out of his company because he was such an asshole over the details. Had some people hating him because he was such an asshole over the details, that he would not spare a single detail from not being the way that he wanted it to be. And because of his ability and willingness to be an asshole about the details, you have these beautiful devices. Point number 3. Today's topic is mastering the details. Tim Ferriss, who's the author of the 4-Hour Book series, he said, I don't know if he got this from someone else, but he's the one I heard it from, so I'm crediting him. He said, you do not rise to the level of your challenges, you fall to the level of your training. This is all about detail right there. That statement right there. I'll say it again. You do not rise to the level of your challenges, you fall to the level of your training. So any of you ever heard someone use the phrase rising to the occasion, or meeting the challenge, or answering the call? That the tougher something gets, the better a person becomes. And we've all used these different cliches at different times in our lives. But what Tim was saying was that, no, that's not actually what happens to people, at least not in the long term. Maybe in the short term you can do that, but in the long term, what happens with all of us is whatever level our attention to detail is, that's pretty much where we're going to end up when things get challenging. The tougher things get in life, you're going to meet those challenges based on how much you've paid attention to detail before things got tough. And I believe that to be true. When your details are not being paid attention to, it's like you have really strong muscles, but you got very weak joints. So this is the person who has really strong calf muscles, really bulging thigh muscles, 8-pack abs, big biceps. They just look perfect muscularly. If you just saw them with no shirt on or saw them on the beach, they got all these muscles that look so impressive, but you put them in a position where they actually have to perform, and all of a sudden they got a foot injury, their knee is hurt, their back is hurting, their elbows are hurting, they got shoulder pain. Why is this? Their joints are weak, even though the muscles look great. The joints are the details. I told y'all when I was working with my trainer Maria back in, this had to be about 10, 11 years ago, I had done all this training by myself, basketball, on the court and off the court for all these years. I hadn't really worked with a trainer exclusively at any point for any extended period of time. And when I met her, I told her that my joints were starting to feel in a way that I didn't like the way they were feeling. I had my lower back was bothering me sometimes. My knees were starting to feel like, something needed to happen with them. But the knee is not a muscle, so it's not like you would just go keep lifting weights and the knee is going to get stronger. It's not the way that it works. You got to know what you're doing. I didn't know what I was doing to do anything to help my knee. And as she took a look at my body and my movements and things, she explained to me, listen, your stabilizer muscles, your joints are what need to be worked on. You're doing all this lifting and you're powerful, you're strong, but every time you run and you jump and you do all these thrusts and these starting and stopping on the basketball court and in the weight room and in your training, all you're doing is stressing these joints even more, but you're not doing anything to strengthen the joints. So what we need to work on is strengthening those joints. So any of you who's a basketball player, if you ever used my Ultimate Athlete program, it was all about strengthening the joints. It's not about doing squats and deadlifts and bench presses and bicep curls. So listen, you don't need a program to do that. You can do that on your own. You could watch somebody's YouTube video, some bro on YouTube can tell you how to do those things. What she showed me was how to work on the joints to strengthen them. They're your ankles, your hips, your knees, your back, your shoulders. Those muscles that you are stressing every time you play basketball, and especially a sport like basketball that requires a lot of agility, starting and stopping, and doing that, strengthening those joints, working on those details in workouts that were often tedious. They're not it's not like all this sweat is pouring off of you. They were not no Instagrammable type of workouts, but they were required for me to be able to perform in such a way that was Instagrammable. You understand what I'm saying? Those are what allowed me to prolong my career. So this is like the person who's not paying attention to detail, having those strong muscles and weak joints. It's like having a car that has these beautiful 20-inch rims on it, but your axles are weak. So the car is going to fall apart, and then your rims are going to get destroyed because the whole car is going to fall on top of it, and your rims will get broken. Nobody ever sees the axles. The person who's standing on the corner watching you drive by in your shiny car with the 20-inch rims, they don't see the axles. But if those axles are weak and your car falls apart, nobody's going to see your car either because it won't be on the road. This is the athlete who can jump high and run fast, but their footwork is so sloppy that they can't really get the most out of their talent. And maybe only a few people know that they didn't get the most out of their talent because only a few people know those details and see that that person is missing them. After the 1992 USA basketball team had gone to Barcelona and won the Olympic medal, Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, who were teammates on the Chicago Bulls, and they were also on that dream team, that USA team, they came home and they said, this saying has been spread around. They said, man, Clyde Drexler, who was a player on the Portland Trail Blazers. They said this guy would be so much of a better player if he had the fundamentals. He doesn't have any fundamentals. Maybe because Clyde was never taught the fundamentals in college or high school or in the pros. He didn't have the same coaches that Michael and Scottie had. And because Clyde was so damn talented, he was still able to be one of the top 12 basketball players on the planet just off of his skill. This is not to say that Clyde didn't practice, not to say he didn't work on his game. It was just that he didn't have the details that a Michael Jordan or a Scottie Pippen had. And those small details made the difference between maybe winning a championship and losing the championship. Mind you, these are the best players in the world, the top 1%. Who's going to be the top 1% of the 1%? It's not usually the guy with the most talent. It's the guy with the most talent who has also mastered the details, mastered the fundamentals. I told you a story about LeBron James one time. He had told one of his teammates, hey, he was telling one of his teammates during a timeout in a game, don't let XYZ player on the other team, don't let him shoot the ball. And the player said, LeBron's teammate retorted, oh, we should let him shoot because he only shoots X number percentage from the three-pointer. We should let him shoot it because he's probably going to miss it. But LeBron said, no, he does shoot that overall but from three, but from that particular spot, he actually shoots really well. And I didn't fill that in with numbers, but here's what you need to understand. LeBron James not only understood the percentage that one of his opponents shot at a three-pointer, he understood what percentage opponents shot at each spot along the three-point line. So it wasn't one number that he knew. He knew that opponent's shooting percentage from 5 different spots along the three-point arc. That's attention to detail. It's been said that LeBron James spends over $1 million a year just taking care of his body. And being that he's in his mid-30s, still playing basketball at a really high level, still one of the best 10 basketball players on the planet after all the minutes that he's put in on the court, all the wear and tear that he's put on his body, I believe it. This is a guy who pays attention to detail. Whether you like LeBron James or not, whether you're a fan or not, the guy pays attention to detail. You cannot deny that. Details, ladies and gentlemen, they eventually catch up to you. Your attention to detail will eventually catch up to you to either propel you forward or to pull you down. But either way, those details will have their word with you at some point. So you should start paying attention to them before they start grabbing your attention in ways that maybe you don't want them to grab you. Let's recap today's topic, which is mastering the details. Point number 1, Phil Sky, a guy who I worked for as an intern my senior year of college, he told me, people do not do what you expect. They do what you inspect. When they know that you're looking at it and paying attention to detail, they will make sure it gets done. If they know you're not paying attention, they will probably not do it. So those of you who are bosses, leaders, managers, owners, having people working for you does not let you off the hook for working. Your job at that point is to check the details of the people to whom you have assigned work. And if you aren't looking at the details, they won't be looking at the details. And then things will fall apart and it will be your fault, 100%. Point number 2, the details separate the great from the good. Phil Jackson had NBA basketball players working on chest passes. John Wooden had the best high school players in the nation teaching them how to put on their socks and how to tie their shoes. Larry Brown had the best players in the world working on post-entry passes. Steve Jobs made sure that the inside of the iPhone looked beautiful, even though you will never see the inside of an iPhone. Why? Because all these people paid attention to detail. They stressed details. They were sticklers for details. They would be assholes, if necessary, about the details just to make sure everybody was paying attention to it. And these guys are the best of the best. So what are you doing? Point number 3. Tim Ferriss said, you do not rise to the level of the challenge, you fall to the level of your training. When your details are not being paid attention to, it's like you have strong muscles, but weak joints. So you can't even use your muscles because your joints can't support the muscle. You understand? You can have 20-inch rims on a car, but weak axles, the car's going to fall apart. Nobody sees the axles, though. You can jump high and run fast, but you got sloppy footwork, so you can't score as many points as you could because your footwork is bad. You got to take an extra step, and that's when you get injured. Details eventually catch up to you, ladies and gentlemen, to either propel you forward or to pull you down. What are your details going to do for you? Work on your game. Dre, all